Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Aerospace Architecture panel. And this is session code ICES 55. And I'm required to read a statement to you when we start this, which is as follows. The purpose of this session is to provide an open exchange of ideas. Can everybody hear me? Remarks made by participants or members of the audience.
This is not for panels.
It was in the envelope I was given.
Wrong envelope. That's a
Well,
that says you can't record it, but that's what we're doing, because we record our panel discussions.
Right. Well, let me finish it anyway. Remarks made by participants or members of the audience cannot be quoted or attributed to the individual or his company, whether recorded or not. No record or remarks are permitted. Likewise, photographs and materials displayed at the session are not permitted. Also, as a courtesy to presenters, please turn off all cell phones and pages, and to speakers too. Oh, I've just spilled some water. That's a good start. Okay. Aerospace architecture has come of age as a discipline within the field of aerospace engineering, and each year is attracting more interest within the architecture and design professions and beyond. As the space community contemplates new human space exploration initiatives after space station, architects and designers are ready to spearhead the design and development of constructed habitat elements that will support the new endeavors. And the panel we have here this morning will discuss positive near-term contributions that can be made in this area with comments invited from the audience. We'd very much like to open this up to general discussion. And if I can just introduce the panel. On my left is Constance Adams. Constance studied sociology at Harvard and received a Master's of Architecture from Yale. She spent 2 years apprenticing with Kenzo Tange Associates in Tokyo, and additional 4 years working on master planning and commercial projects in Berlin before moving to Johnson Space Center, where she was instrumental in, and pivotal, perhaps is a better word, in the design of the Transhelp module project. Kurt Michels is an architect in traditional practice with 50+ projects and a former naval officer. And he is, where's your card, Kurt? You are Director of Space Architecture and Engineering at NextEra. He is the former project manager and designer of the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station. Mark, on my immediate right, is an architect I've known for many years from NASA Ames Research Center. And I think you've been there about 20 years, is that correct? 24 years, right. Mark has a considerable background in applying terrestrial architecture principles to the space field, been involved in a wide number of space-related architecture projects, and I would say has been instrumental in drawing together the architectural profession and stimulating its interest in the aerospace field. And finally, Dr. Scott Howe. Scott is also a practicing architect, earned his PhD at Michigan University. He spent 10 years working in Tokyo, Japan, with...
Not here at the last conference, I'll just, the last workshop, I'll sort of mention how it got started, which was that I had asked all the people who were planning on attending the Aerospace Architecture Symposium at the World Space Congress for several months prior to the Congress to send inputs on the basic question or basic questions involving what is space architecture or aerospace architecture, and that was another one of the which should we call it. And we compiled all of the answers into one large document, and then we pulled out each thesis statement from the answers and made separate PowerPoint charts for each one. In the end, there were like 120 such statements, and so everyone, there were about 60 people in the room, so everyone got 2 charts some of which were their own, but very rarely. Usually it was somebody else's to read out loud. And the whole group then dispositioned it in terms of what does this statement mean? What type of a statement is it? From that, we were able then to organize things into more compiled thoughts, and then determine by the end of the day whether we all agreed on the thoughts or not. So several were thrown out because they could not achieve a full consensus of agreement. And the ones that were kept were wordsmithed to a point at which everyone, whether or not they were native speakers of English, everyone agreed on the language, which I think makes a very big difference because they can't be mistranslated in the future. Or at least the chances of that are smaller. So we're going to try and do the same thing today and on Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. It's unfortunate to have to do this in 2 blocks. The 2 hours I think today may just be involved in looking at the statements that I've managed to gather and Serkan very helpfully compiled into the thesis charts over the last few weeks, starting with months, and organize them into whether or not, what kind of sense we think they make, or what these statements are trying to say. We may just be able to get that far today before we have to break. But that would be far enough, I think, because then we would have something really to refine on Thursday evening. So if you all agree that that seems like a good approach for tackling this question that's sort of multifold, then we should go ahead and get started. I will, I guess we have 30 of these, and there are 5, 7, 8. That's quite a lot of statements for each of us to read. Let's start with 2 each and hope that some more people show up. And if not, if they haven't all shown up by the time we've gotten to the end of the ones that we're using, then we'll just distribute more. How does that sound? Yeah.
I guess I'll start right away. Use the time. I have 2 here. Who should educate space architects? Qualification of universities, professors, and so on, linked to aerospace, engineering, agencies, and industries is essential. The next one is, what should a space architect be able of? Definition of skill sets and base knowledge. Well, this
one at a time. One at a time.
Did you say that we also mailed out sort of this questionnaire to some people? Do we use that as a starting structure to put these?
You're using the questionnaire? I don't think of the questionnaire as being really the same thing, because the questionnaire was to educators, and it was rather more specific. I think that questionnaire kind of begins at a level of detail after where we're trying to leave off here. Mm-hmm.
Could you explain that statement?
I'm
not following your time sequence there.
The paper that Andreas and Scott and Ted did last year on education in space architecture involved questionnaires so intensive that I never was able to find the time to fill one out, of people who taught space architecture about exactly what kind of curriculum they used, and pretty detailed information about how they taught this field. But I think that the questions that we're working with start at a much higher level, like, is it responsible to train people as space architects, first of all? Secondly, do we think they need to have an architect's education plus an engineer's education? Is an architect's education at a low level plus on-the-job training good enough? Do we think, need they be registered architects plus? And there's already sort of beyond. Once we have more consensus about those questions than the kind of detail that you all turned up in your paper.
But I'm referring to that questionnaire, actually.
To that questionnaire. But on my questionnaire,
Question. I think it was.
well, the most fundamental aspects, I didn't say curriculum though. Oh,
Well,
I
how
asked
should
what
the
people's
curriculum-
personal background was. I didn't say how should the curriculum, I said what are the fundamental aspects.
What kind of curriculum?
Did I say what kind of curriculum? Okay, propose. Oh, yeah, all right. Well, I meant that at a larger scale, but all right.
Because
Yeah,
this
no, I
relates
see.
sort of to this, who should educate and what should be educated.
Right.
These are basically these two questions. So
Yeah, the kind of
that's
institution, and for architecture versus space architecture? Is that really the question?
Yeah, if space architecture is sufficiently different to architecture, that it should be its own. That's just short of these.
Okay, here comes the rest of our crew.
That's, okay. It's interesting because, when I wrote it, I wasn't thinking about those terms, but.
Constance, you want to arrange where you want them, they should sit?
Well, people should probably try to avoid the camera, but sit around here so that people can see
Yeah,
the black.
please sit on those two
Over
sides.
there is good too.
Well, are you gonna
because
write on that, if you're gonna write on the blackboard, then sitting over there is gonna be.
Sitting over there is a
just
very
as
bad
possible.
idea. Over here is good, and on that far wall over there where there's lots of room behind the board is good. Man. Okay, everybody needs to take a couple of these statements, please. Thank you. That's good though. All right.
Constance, having looked at this, I didn't realize what you're handing out. So having looked at these, I'm not quite as clear as I thought I was on why you handed these out and what we will do.
What's
with
going to
each.
happen is that each person is going to read out a statement and to the room that we all then interpret. And it may end up, with a group interpretation, rather different from the way the author might have intended it or what they were thinking at the time. But if everybody sort of agrees on the interpretation, then it becomes a part of the structure of whatever the final document is.
Okay, so the end game
The goal is
is
to create
yeah,
a
what's the
document.
end? Okay.
Tomorrow evening, we
And that
walk
document,
out.
what is the
The
content or
document
purpose of that
It's
document?
going to be a sort of guidelines on the education in space architecture.
Thank you.
We hope. It may end up being the opposite, but at least that's the goal. And this way, sort of the statements are collected through a pretty private means, really, which is email. And it works very well, or it has in the past, for people to sort of take ownership of statements that aren't their own, and determine what they think they mean. So, all right.
So should we discuss about the who should educate?
Yeah, that goes under institution,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. I think from the emails we had, there was definitely an agreement should be universities, higher education. We can definitely say that. What I remember, there was a big drift towards postgraduate studies in many answers.
What do you mean by postgraduate?
Yeah.
After first degree, after additional.
After
3 year degree.
finishing.
For them, the first degree is like our master's degree. So do you mean post-diploma engineer, right?
After basically you finished being an architect, having architect's diploma, you have, how do we say?
We would call it post-professional.
Yeah.
That once you become a registered professional, then you go back for additional training in a
Right.
specialty. That's often called a post-professional degree, which is equivalent to a doctorate level. Sort of, yes. Not in a scholarly sense, perhaps, but.
Well, because in American schools, in American schools of architecture, there's a new business in so-called second professional degrees, like a degree in preservation. Columbia offers one, and I know some other schools do too. So that's like a second master's, which is also becoming the vogue in education. In the school district where my wife works, they put emphasis on getting second master's degrees. PhD won't get them anything.
One of the problems with the architecture schools in the United States is that degrees don't carry any professional weight. They're purely academic degrees, whereas in Britain, for example, if you do a 5-year master's degree or a diploma in architecture, that's considered a professional academic exam. And then you go on to take professional exams 2 years after that. So there is a differential here between different countries as to what is recognized in the way of an architectural degree and what isn't.
Well, no, it does carry weight because the architectural degree is considered in most states to be the equivalent of a 7-year apprenticeship. And there are only a very few states left that will allow you to substitute an apprenticeship for a first professional degree, California being one of them. But
you still have to take the NCARB 12-hour test.
well, you still have to, it's more than that. It's a total of 4 days.
4 days,
test.
whatever.
You have, yeah, right. You still have to take it. So in England, you take a 2-day test. Here, you take a 4-day test.
Well, you don't take a test at all in Britain.
Oh, you don't?
No, there's no, once you've got the degree, you go on to professional practice tests, which are different things. There's no design, there's no professional design exam on a post-degree basis at all. So, I mean, that's why I'm saying that I'm concerned that the definition, we have to be very precise about this, because we have to be very precise about what type of degree is considered to be okay.
I guess this also depends on the level at which we're talking, because I think, for example, if we were to conclude that space architecture is best taught at a post-professional level, well, all countries, on whatever basis, do have a place at which you are considered a professional architect. And, you know, so that would be fairly clear, but it's a pretty rigorous definition. You know, I don't know that.
Just one question. You're always talking about architects. So what about all the others, like designers, interface designers, graphic designers?
That's a very good point.
Scott, perhaps you should, if you have it handy, review what the subcommittee charter is in terms of the allied profession, design professions.
Yeah, let me open it up here.
Well, the other
What
question
happened
is,
to the method that we were planning on using for this morning?
how many?
What happened to the method that we were planning on using for this morning?
It may be a good
Different
idea
people have
go-
already weighed in on this subject,
to
and
go
I'd rather that we review those statements first.
quicker through the statements than getting hooked up on one, because
That
I think
was
there are
the
some
idea.
other questions
Lots of them.
which have to be answered before that one
And they're interrelated.
is really.
They're interrelated a lot of times, you know, but there were respondents that took different positions on that. So I think, I'd rather that if we could, you know, just bunch statements up according to which category they seem best to address, and read them one at a time so that everybody digests them. We have a better basis for continuing this conversation.
Yeah, the skill set will come again, so I think we just go on, yeah, who and what.
What are your statements then?
My state, now, does everybody give a statement to that one question, or just?
You just read it out loud, and we all talk about it, or not.
Yeah, who should educate space architects? Qualification of universities, professors, and so on, linked to aerospace engineering agencies and industries is essential.
The answer is what qualification?
No,
The answer was what?
qualification of universities, professors, and so on is important, or a point, an aspect linked to aerospace engineering agencies and industries is essential.
So it sounds like a combination of, you know, higher level formal education and on-the-job experience. We could go ahead and put that up under
Yes, I think
institution.
I do that right away.
I'll do that.
The tape is confidential.
That was Kurt's job last year, right? Or
Yeah.
Is the tape still there?
where's the tape?
Yeah. Thank you.
So let me ask a question now that we've had one reading.
Hey, Michael.
What is
You sit on that side of the table.
statement that was just read going to become a part of the document, or?
It might, or it might conflict with so many other statements in the same category that we agree it's
Okay.
not the right answer.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll just take it, go ahead, read it.
The
Let's
other
move
one,
on.
what should the space architect be able of? Definition of skill sets and base knowledge. Well, that's not answers, then rather
It's not an
points.
answer.
That's
But,
the skill set curriculum, probably.
yeah,
That's the,
okay. Scott, do you feel ready to read your statements, or?
Sure. Okay, I have a keen interest in this and many areas, and most of my education is self-education. I find things I want to do and find a project to educate myself with. I am not a specialist and probably will never be. Architecture for me is my chariot of exploration. It is not and never will be for me an end in itself.
That sounds, does that go under institution?
No.
Is there an argument for auto?
Fundamental.
yes.
Well, it's the
Yes.
anti-institution statement.
Yes, it's the autodidact question.
Well, but it sounds like a personal opinion or testimonial that,
At this point in the game, that's the best we have to work with. So we're the only people.
It's all opinion.
It's all opinion. It is. We're just trying to achieve a kind of
How
consensus
about
between.
fundamental though? I think it might be.
I mean, we have to say
Fundamental?
most are autodidacts at this point because there is no degree. Is it? Well,
No, there's no real
or-
degree.
Why don't we see if there's any sort of other commentary?
For now, okay, could you explain why you think it fits in fundamental, because that's opaque to me.
Well, because it's talking about education, and in this case, this person uses architecture as it's not an institution. It's not necessarily a curriculum. It's more of a vehicle for educating on other subjects. So that person will find some kind of project, and it sounds like architecture is the one that usually gets picked to.
Then it's personal development, not necessarily.
It says doing it yourself.
Do you want me to chime in here, because I wrote that
Please.
statement?
Oh, good. There we go. Thank you.
Confession time.
Yeah, well, no,
No, it's-
I make that statement because I think if you hold, I decided a long time ago, if you hold the building as the object of your affection, the thing that's the conclusion of your work, it's kind of like the old philosophical problem of going to the doorknob. If you're actually going to the doorknob, you'll never get there because you keep cutting the distance in half. You have always got to be shooting for something beyond. I mean, that's why I get involved in this kind of stuff, because I'm shooting for something beyond. And I think any educational system has to somehow impart that sense of you're always going for something beyond. The object that you think is straight in front of you is not really what you're after. And that enlarges whatever you do.
So in that context, it is fundamental aspects of the education. Okay, good work, Scott.
Michael.
No,
Oh,
well, yes,
Scott,
Michael,
yeah,
but
gotcha.
Scott saw through it to a point that I didn't, so. Yes, good work too, Michael. Good work to everybody who filled out statements. Okay. This one's kind of long.
Oh, you want me to read this?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, in addition to the above, and there's no above attached, so I'm not sure what that is.
Ellipsis.
I think there are some things architects can do that will enable them to adapt their perception and understanding of environments related to outer space. For example, here on Earth, we take a lot of things for granted: gravity, atmospheric pressure, natural illumination, the entire gamut of colors that we have. space, it's different. And it's important for architects working on space projects to absorb and live this new paradigm. Here are some things they can do in addition to their formal degree and license. Parabolic flights, read through debriefs, talk to the astronauts, cosmonauts, have an innate curiosity for all things that are different from the ones we are accustomed to. Cultivate that curiosity through books, travel, research, etc. Have some experience working in a real space agency or company that designs and builds space hardware.
Well, curriculum, or could it also sort of address the question of whether space architecture is significantly different from terrestrial architecture?
No, that was actually an answer for the second question about the curriculum.
A curriculum, okay.
Although a lot of that seems to
Sometimes.
be aimed at self-education, which is not really quite curriculum. It's maybe more fundamental aspects of the education, sort of self-motivation.
Yes, we might come to that conclusion. But curriculum is also the home for that.
But this is the definition of skill sets and base knowledge. It is sort of trying to say you need architecture and you need one-on-one experience with space flight.
Well, I guess I interpreted it as suggesting that for those who are coming from what I'll call the civil architecting, because I don't come from civil architecting, I come from space systems, but it sounds like the point being made there is that there has to be some cross-pollination between the roles and responsibilities of people like yourself who are certified or registered architects that build structures and the people who build space systems, whether it's habitats or vehicles or missions.
And it's professional though and not institutional. They're not saying you need to also study aerospace engineering.
Absolutely correct.
So, is there further disagreement about where this should go, or does that seem okay where it is? Okay, if we want to move it later, we'll move it. Michael, you're up.
Okay. Environmental technology, more physics-based rather than cookbook rules of thumb. Coverage of selected extraterrestrial environments. Coverage of past solutions for environmental systems, Skylab, Mir, Shuttle, ISS. This necessarily involves a better understanding of life science, chemistry, and radiation.
Is that a fundamental aspect?
Either that or curriculum.
Curriculum.
Let me can I ask a question that might help. Is curriculum to include just general knowledge acquisition, which could include experiences, or is curriculum intended to be strictly from the educational class perspective?
I think the question, at least what I intended, was to ask exactly that question. Do you think it needs to all be formal institutional learning, or on-the-job learning?
I was just asking, your category called curriculum, does it include stuff beyond classroom training?
That's the deal.
Peace.
So,
Actually,
Well, that's a different definition than I would use, but if those are the rules, we can set any rules we want to here. But to me, curriculum is, you have an instructor and a syllabus and a directed course, whereas independent study, like that last answer, personally, I wouldn't call that curriculum.
Let's put that like this, the curriculum is, I think it's just a placeholder.
in the sense of curriculum vitae,
If somebody
Okay.
could propose the curriculum of the university would be being in classes, having these lectures, and work 1 year at an agency before you get any degree, that could be the curriculum
Okay.
you're looking for.
I mean, personally, I'd want to pursue a somewhat broader definition of curriculum. I mean, I've taught, not at the university level, but at middle school level. Fascinating level to teach at, but I've taught a course called Making a Town, where you set the problem in front of people, and the problem is what evolves the learning experience in each student, and each student, each person pursuing any kind of knowledge uses the problem as a means of pursuing and learning. And quite often the curriculum kind of grows, or the nature of the problem evolves, and the nature of what you're teaching evolves as the problem's evolving.
Yeah, that's actually the hot paradigm lately, is problem-based learning. And architecture studios have been doing this for many years to a certain extent. But I think it's a really good model. It's a a model where you're able to give freedom to the students to try to go in whatever direction they need to do to solve the problem in the end.
Exactly.
Well, Ted, where would you put this then? Under curriculum, areas of study?
I would put that under curriculum.
Okay.
But the last one that seemed more self-motivational, I probably would have put under fundamental aspects. The one that talks about travel and.
How about we shift it up and let it bridge the two?
Okay.
Well, you know, a lot of people at this
Fair
point,
enough.
a lot of people at this point are pursuing space architecture as an avocation, and they kind of, you know, learn on their own and, you know, by reading and such as that, so they kind of make their own curriculum. And I think that, you know, those people who are pursuing it as an avocation and learning on their own are going to evolve curricula that are going to end up in an academic setting.
But let me contribute that in addition, as I've mentioned to a few people earlier, you know, industry, especially the aerospace contractors like Lockheed and Boeing and those groups, they have labeled titles called system architect or chief architect for, you know, which I know, I'm certain, since I know many of them, have nothing to do with the certified registered civil architect, the building type architects. And yet those people are, it's my opinion, that there's 70 or 90% in common on the kinds of problems you worry about, the kind of processes you bring to the table, but they're involved in large complex systems, primarily aerospace and or outer space. And so to that end, these people, you know, there's typically not formal education labeled space architect or chief architect. It's skill-based and experience-based and capability-based. You have to be good at a bunch of stuff to be even considered for that kind of a role.
I'm going to go ahead and write that down as your personal input to this area, kind of. So capability-based experience. What are you saying? Could you give me a phrase that sums it up, sort of?
Give me 10 seconds.
Okay. You didn't have a chance to provide inputs before, so.
I guess experience-based would be as short a way as I could say it, is that it's, you know, in the industry world that I've come out of, it's, you know, you have to have been trained or, you know, demonstrate some competency in probably several different areas before anybody's going to trust you to be the chief engineer or chief architect or the senior technical leader on any large project.
So it's somewhat hands-on as an apprentice for a while until.
Absolutely. Very much that kind of, you know, sort of the industrial on-the-job training equivalent of an apprentice. But it's almost always you have to be considered good, very good at some specific thing, whether it's software engineering, hardware engineering, structures. You actually have to almost be considered an expert in some engineering type thing, and then have the, you know, the personal characteristics that you want to expand your realm and your ability to influence large. You know, everybody, some people like to be electrical engineers. They want to build chips or they want to build
Also an argument
structure.
for cross-training?
Absolutely. But Vitruvius's first book describes it well, I think. Be good at something and then be very good at something and be good at a whole lot of other things.
That's architecture.
Yeah.
At least we hope so.
Next one.
Yep, please.
Structure, pressure vessels, launch loads, acceleration and vibration, gravitational torque, atmospheric drag, oscillations of lightweight, flimsy structures.
Skill sets and base knowledge.
Scott, there's a plug over here that could make it less dangerous for you to be in the, or your cord to be in the line of
Or we
fire.
could pull those two tables forward a little bit.
Well, that's why I moved over here as opposed to over there, because my cord doesn't reach. She's tripping over the
Could we
cord.
push these tables forward?
We could push these tables back.
Let me move over there, it's probably better.
I'll move up my seat.
There's a receptacle over here behind
Yeah.
Nathan. I don't know if your cord's long enough, but it should be. Oh, you didn't bring the other part of the
No,
extension.
just got the short part.
Oh, I have it. I'll loan it to you.
Oh, thank you.
It's like an incredibly hazardous thing for a bunch of architects to be tolerating.
Started to panic there.
Yes, good point. And typically enough, again, we're architects, so we don't have a window in it. Anyway, are you up, Kurt?
We have a virtual window. It's a window.
Oh, we do have a window. It's just.
It's a window, but it looks out on the interior, and it has virtual foliage in the green blind, a la Michael Graves' Green Bean. Remember?
Okay.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Architectural design in bold. Disciplines that are required for a conventional architectural degree.
Sounds like fun.
Theory of architecture, spacecraft design, biology and physics, aerospace technology, earth and space science, materials and chemistry, materials and thermostructural design, concepts of sustainability and process, design and technology, computer-generated visual imagery, infrastructures of construction, ergonomics and anthropometry,
Yeah.
whatever.
Pometry.
Anthropometry. There you have it.
Wait, can I ask, what happened to the skill list? Where's the skill list? You mentioned this, the last item. Skills.
Skill list,
Curriculum?
under curriculum.
Okay.
Well, the curriculum, I mean, this statement sort of restates what curriculum, definition of skill sets and base knowledge, so that's skill sets, curriculum. Do we think that that's what this is also? I'm not seeing it on here.
It's the answer of Maria to the second question.
To the second question?
Yeah.
Okay. Theory.
Are these things that we have, are these answers to some survey that some of us?
Yeah, which is why I'm writing
So that
down
way
more
explain some of
answers.
them are not complete sentences, or
Right.
they use pronouns for which there is no subject.
Yeah,
That was helpful.
which is,
Now, if I just look at the survey questions,
Yeah.
that would be really helpful.
that's why I'm writing your things down, because it's sort of your on-the-job answers to the survey you never received, so.
You can get a hard copy later.
Kurt, did you not get a second?
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I did. I wrote a bunch of notes on the back of it, so that's okay. Besides those that regard the education of traditional architecture as architectural design, a sound knowledge in aerospace scientific and technological aspects.
Period.
Period.
Is desired, or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, or something.
You know, there's a real sort of fuzzy area between the first and second questions, which it didn't seem to me to be the case when I tossed out the questions, but that could be fundamental aspects, or it could be skill set, curriculum, to my mind.
I think this, you know, the whole notion of, you need to have a traditional architectural education plus the additional layer of aerospace architectural information. You know, if you practice space architecture, and that seems to be what, you know, this is, so it sort of falls under curriculum. It's a broad, you know, statement about that.
Can I ask what number 4 then addresses? Because this one seems to all fit into this whole issue of what differentiates.
Number 4 is supposed to address the bifurcation issue, you know, that maybe space architecture should be a completely different profession. Correct?
Basically.
Yeah. Because I wrote that question.
But that has an inherent assumption that in fact it should be considered an equivalent profession to civil architecting, which may not be necessarily the case.
That's for the next workshop.
Just
Please
wanna
come back.
I just want to express my opinion of what I thought was the underlying assumption. That's,
Please come again.
because, again, industry has, we have architects, and I'm certain very few of them have gone through schools of architecture type training. They're systems engineers, or they're mechanical engineers, or structural, so.
Yeah, I've been hearing, you know, that argument since we've been here, and I think
On
that.
this planet?
Yes. And I also hear it on Zircon. But I think that, you know, if you were to really get down and look at, you know, the skill sets and the training, you know, of systems engineers who are systems architects, and what architects are trained to do, I think it would be vastly different.
No, this is an answer to the first question.
Really?
Yeah. It's basic aspects, because it's not, curriculum is a little bit more specific, meant to be a little bit more specific. Like how? What do you need? How do you get it?
Well, are we,
Let's write that down to help us.
Constance, did you derive that by going back and looking at who answered it that way?
I did.
Okay. Now, isn't part of the mission here to make our own individual assessment?
Well, also, yes, but here's the thing. Andreas wrote up these words, but to me, from the beginning, these words did not very well represent what I intended by the questions. They were drawn from the questions, but they were not the full question. And so what we're sort of working backwards towards is what was the first question meant to ask? And it was, what do we need? What? And the second question was meant to address, how do we get it? And the third question, in a way, is meant to ask,
Who?
where? Or by whom? Where or from whom? Right? And my father always said that any aspect of history has to answer the questions where, who, why, when, and so what. And I think that the fourth question is more of a so what kind of question. I don't know. Why or so what?
Or it might be, what if we got now, and where does that, what is missing, I guess?
This question may end up, whatever we get for this in our conversation this week, may end up not in the education charter so much as laying a foundation for the professional practice, scope of professional practice workshop. Or it may end up being significant here, I don't know, but so I'm just going to see how those feel as key questions.
You just popped a thought into my mind.
Yay! That's what I'm here for.
That I'll throw out, and then we can probably talk about it later. But I think this is going to evolve over time as what we're doing up there and out there evolves over time. I mean, right now, and the preceding history has been that it's largely an engineering problem. But as more and more people go out there, and as societies begin to inhabit space, if that ever does come about, happen, then I think the education, the needs are going to shift more towards what we actually do down here as land-based architects, at least in the sort of sociological, sort of human aspects of how you put together spaces for communities.
And that's actually a statement, it's evolving needs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really going to evolve. It's the whole nature of what we're doing. If we go where we'd like to go, if we colonize Mars, if we really start to inhabit outer space, the whole thing's going to shift, and different sort of sets of skills.
Evolving needs parallel to evolving needs, that's good to know. So also why it's worth having documents, because if for no other reason than it's something to fight against, but that we've all agreed upon at one point in time, and may then all disagree about it later.
Agree upon what?
Documents we're trying to create.
Right.
Ted, are you up next?
Yes.
Thank you.
Internships and a mentor network, especially for students who are interested in the field of study, but may not live in close proximity to space industry settings. I would put this
Sounds
under
like a how.
curriculum.
Yeah, sounds like a how. I mean, as opposed to a how. No, I was
Here and there. I use my slides.
Huh? Oh, see, you're worse than I am, but nobody understands.
What do you consider the most fundamental aspects of the education of a space architect? Breadth, diversity, and flexibility of curriculum. Internship and practical experience a must because of the unique nature of the field. Generous and open exchange of ideas between established space architects and students. So that's also curriculum.
Although it answered the first
It
question.
answers the first question.
Yeah, it might be first,
Um,
number one.
Yeah.
See, number one is sort of confusing because the fundamental aspects of education as opposed to the fundamental aspects of architecting are two different things. And so if it's the fundamental aspects of educating an architect is the intent of one, then that sounds very much like two.
Right. Right. And this, but it's, yeah. It's talking about general studies, basically, and flexibility, and conversation and discourse. You know, I sort of like to put it where it wanted to go to begin with, as opposed to in the curriculum, but I can see the argument. Should we take a vote? I read it again. Breadth, diversity, and, well, fundamental aspects of the education of space architect. Breadth, diversity, and flexibility of curriculum. Internship and practical experience are must because of the unique nature of the field. Generous and open exchange of ideas between established space architects and students. Does this seem like a what question?
Can I
Or a how?
Can I propose a slight amendment? If you strike out the adjective unique, I could vote that it's a valid statement. And then it would go into one.
Well, the goal is to work on whether we agree with the statements in the next phase.
Oh, okay. Well, it would be, all right, hold the vote.
So you're okay to, so for, is it for number one, a what statement?
What? A what?
Okay, agreed. And number two is a how statement? Well, it's close, but it's going for number two, all right.
Because it talks about open exchange, but it doesn't say what they're exchanging.
Yeah, there's a good point to either one.
An aerospace architect needs to focus first on firmness, or we don't survive the space experience. Second comes commodity, or we don't have functional structures. And there must be delight in addition to utility, where there is no pleasure in the experience of living or working in space beyond the pleasure of the activities.
Is that left over from last year?
Sounds like it.
Number one.
Is that Ted's?
No, it's not mine. Why do people keep accusing
Somebody
me of
must have
these
quoted
things?
you a lot, though.
I don't think I wrote that.
It's from Ed, I am only a programmer ball.
Yeah, that's right.
That one's settled, number one.
There seems to be an agreement that there was number one, everybody? Okay.
This one is a very good education in physics. No physics, no space architects.
Number one?
Yeah.
I think curriculum.
Number one in bold?
Okay.
Well, it's not real specific
No.
curriculum. It's a part of what you need to know. What does it say? One class, summer school, advanced high school physics,
Yeah.
a graduate degree in physics,
A very good education, PhD.
VGE in physics.
Well, but you have one up there under curriculum, the second one in environmental technology. It says more physics-based rather than cookbook rule of thumb. How is that one?
I thought that one
Different.
belonged in number one, but I was overruled on that one. So I agree with your question. I mean, I think it's more like this one
Okay.
than like those.
Well, you should put them together wherever you put them, I guess is my
All
point.
right.
And straddle.
Well, we can re-vote on some of these things too, they're flexible.
Well, let's start with here and then see. It's kind of stacked up.
I mean, from all what we keep discussing, this seems pretty fundamental. If we want to make a distinction to architecture.
Well,
Well-
it's a what and not a how. Is what we need is an education in physics, not how do we get that education in physics or where we get that education in physics. So if we just go back to those rules and,
Or even how much of an education.
Yeah, I'd say how much is a big question.
Yes, quality of this.
how much is kind of the, yeah, that's true.
Next one.
Next.
If we don't start dreams in children's heads early enough, they never have the power to fulfill.
No, it's a question of when, and we don't have that really on here. It could go to from whom.
Well, I would consider it a fundamental. I mean,
Yeah, among these 4 questions, I would say it's fundamental.
Okay.
if instilling the
Unless
interest
you
in
want to add a
space and the
line.
youth of our nation, of our
Not
planet,
really.
didn't tend to be country-oriented on a planet.
What could be,
It's a success story.
could be curriculum, how we get there. We start by pumping our children's heads full of all kinds of,
Yeah, space Lego.
starts with pointing out aircraft to our children as they go by. Uh-oh, somebody's gonna do
Is there children in there?
that. As the children go by. Yes.
Fly by.
Okay.
Well, don't
Space
start too
camps.
early. Ask Charlotte if she's interested in space.
Disney type space camps.
No, that's an unfair question.
No, Mathilde's 2 favorite things are airplanes and shoes, so I keep her focused on the shoes. She wants to do the planes later, it'll cost me more money.
My kids are sick of space.
Bad dad.
So, next one. Why should we educate space architects? Discussing the limits of the market in relation to the benefit of the engineering generalist, or bringing the architect skill set into engineering? So, that's one.
That almost goes under 4 to me. Should there even be a space architect?
That is, actually, that's
Yeah.
very good, because that is number 4, you're right. Let's call that why, then it's not so what, it's why, so what is next. What am I doing? Thank you.
It should say, why should we educate space architects? It should be, why should we educate architects to be space architects?
Well, it's more like,
Is it
why have a
responsible?
label called space architect? Isn't that sort of the why question, as opposed to some other label?
No, it's like a naval architect.
Right.
It's a separate
Which is
discipline.
completely separate discipline.
I'm-
But,
Should it be? I don't know.
you know, do what they do, is it comparable to what a terrestrial architect does? Yes.
Right.
You know, they're a configuration controller for creating a space that, you know, just happens to be a propulsive vehicle, but it carries people and cargo around.
And then there are people who study transportation design, they usually do that in industrial design schools. And yet they could be naval architect, you know, it's, so.
And the name of our subcommittee, remember, is Aerospace Architect. Sure.
Good point. I think we should, that's very easy to forget. We're dealing with not just space, but anything that flies between where we are now and there. It's a very important point too.
And the facilities that support them.
Yeah, and personally, I don't really think there's a difference between, this is my personal opinion, architects, marine architects, industrial designers, whatever, just
Well, if we go
More
back
common than-
to another level of philosophy that's often been attributed to Ted, if what we're talking about under
All
the rubric
space
of space architecture actually is architecture, and everything else is a subset of it, you know, then, but we're not there yet, so.
I'm sure the
Please
individual
maintain.
practitioners of the other disciplines, industrial design, interior design, don't consider themselves to be subsets of architecture.
Or
Yeah.
software.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, you know, all these people are contributors and are valuable participants in the design process for space habitats. And that's, you know, it may end up that space architecture is an amalgamation of those disciplines.
Words are so limiting, if only we could figure out a way of drawing it.
It should emphasize disciplinary design by bringing together a number
Excuse me, please start again from the beginning, I missed.
Okay.
That's what you said in the crash.
It should emphasize interdisciplinary design by bringing together a number of departments within a university, perhaps with an additional goal of training architects to be team leaders insofar as they are generalissimo generalists.
Number 2?
How?
It sounds like, it sounds like number 2. Yeah, Sarah Khan pointed out it's a response to number 1, but it's a how. Rather than a what, I think. You think it's
Is
a
the
what?
curriculum really the what more than the, or is it the what and the how?
Just erase the word curriculum. How do we achieve this? What do we need to know? How do we get that knowledge?
Why don't you call it training?
Training.
Education.
Well, it's an education workshop, can't use it twice.
It's in bold. Bold with chalk doesn't work very well. Okay, let's read it again.
It should emphasize interdisciplinary design by bringing together a number of departments within a university, perhaps with an additional goal of training architects to be team leaders insofar as they are generalissimo generalists.
Well, of course, suddenly then I'm seeing just interdisciplinary as opposed to at what level the training should take place. But it is saying multidisciplinary in a university.
Which is essentially part of what I meant by cross-training there.
Right.
Both from an educational and an experience perspective, you should be multi or interdisciplinary.
Isn't that what the
So Florian, why do you think it's not a how?
When you talk, when I read the first question, what do you consider the most fundamental aspects of the education of a space architect? So I think that's really fundamental.
And that's what they were meaning. They were meaning to answer question 1. So I could go either way on that one.
I think number 1 and number 2 are fairly equal, but I'm not sure how I can separate those two.
Equal or similar?
They're similar?
There's enough of a difference, though, I think.
There is a difference, we haven't, we've been muddying it up a bit.
Yeah.
So we just need to get it all up there and then do another shuffle.
I think the point is that when you say how do you get there, when I think the interdisciplinary design, that's where you should be in the end. So that's why I think it should be number 1.
It seems like number 1 would be better if we say, what are the skills? Number 2 is, how do we get those skills? So it might be.
I won't argue with that.
The term fundamental aspects seems to be
Fundamental skills
confusing
and
everybody.
knowledge.
Skills.
Yeah.
You can differentiate between education and skills.
Yeah.
Education does
Right.
not necessarily provide skills. It
Exactly.
provides
Yeah.
knowledge. Skills evolve, skills
Yeah, so
you
skills
develop.
skills could be just little one-liners.
Knowledge or skills fundamental to space architecture.
And then if we think of it in those terms, then we can reassign some of those terms.
Like environmental technology and physics.
Yeah.
Oh, it's up here.
So something in internship could stay number 2, but something like the skills of the system degree would
Yeah,
be one.
right.
Yeah.
And some other things that they might be able to move down as well.
I don't know what the next page was about. Okay. This is 1.
Yeah.
High educational standards and the emphasis on common sense, creative design, and technical base knowledge. This is because a space architect would be required to be the most highly specialized generalist in the design team.
Yikes.
A specialized general.
Sounds like an oxymoron. Most highly specialized generalist, huh?
Could we create a number 5 category, other?
That's what so what was meant to be. Well, what do you think? Is it other? Is it within the parameters of what we're talking about? I think it is that.
And actually, to me, it sort of goes again to the seam of the transition that's happening now, wherein, you know, you're moving from what is strictly and solely an engineering discipline into something that, because it's having more and more human beings involved in it, is becoming an architectural discipline. And sort of that statement recognizes that engineering is a very specific sort of set of knowledge skills, and architecture is a broader thing, and trying to come up with an engine architect or something like that, engine arca profession that sort of straddles both. And I don't know if you can really do that. I think what's really going to evolve is you'll start to get architects, and they'll work with the engineers about specific aspects, you know, much the way we do in buildings down here. I mean, I use structural engineers to help me hold the building up when it gets beyond a certain very fundamental building type.
Architecture already is supposed to straddle it.
Okay,
Straddle.
we need a change of videotape break.
Everybody say what you really think.
Would you mind repeating the statement?
High educational standards and an emphasis on common sense, creative design, and technical base knowledge. This is because a space architect would be required to be the most highly specialized generalist in the design.
That's a fundamental skill.
Go to the restroom.
We may not agree with it, but it's a fundamental skill. Okay, we're halfway through our time. I just wanted to point that out to people. We can go over by about half an hour, so you guys